Recording in progress.
A very good afternoon to all my dear students. Welcome to today's session, and this is the second session for our chapter number 4, which is audit evidence. So students, I hope that whatever we have done so far, you have gone through that. So over to you,
I have
Ankita ma'am.
I have to make one announcement. So
Yeah.
students, due to some unfortunate situations created by few students in the last few days, chat is being disabled for few days. Please send your query through Ask Your Query feature in app or through viewers knowledge portal. In the last 15 minutes, chats will be enabled for addressing your queries. Thank you.
Okay, so students, as you have heard that chat has been disabled, but on the BOS knowledge portal, you can like whatever is the link, you can send in your queries there, and last 15 minutes chat will be enabled, right? So let us quickly start with the topic that is scheduled for today. So we were discussing assertions in our last session, right? So I have told you that if you have to understand and learn the definition of the term assertion, just split it into two parts. That is, first, management has to do something with respect to assertion, and the second part whereby the auditor is supposed to do something with respect to assertion. So the first part says that these are the representations by management. You can say declarations. So another word can be declaration. But yes, the definition that is given, it says that these are the representations by the management. It can be explicit or otherwise. Explicit is these are expressly mentioned, or otherwise means opposite of it, that is implied, that are embodied in the financial statement, that are included in the financial statement, right? So I gave you example of building. So if the company has to tell the users of the financial statement, or the management has to tell the users of the financial statement that the building, the historical cost of which is 20 CR is owned by the company. So management is going to show that figure in the financial statement. So that is why the term embodied in the financial statement, right? And what the auditor is going to do with these assertions, he's going to use these assertions in order to see as to whether there are potential misstatements, right? So the second part of the definition says, as used by the auditor to consider different types of potential misstatement. So I told you in the last session that the term potential is really very, very important. It means likely, it may happen, right? That may occur. Again, the term may is also very, very important because Abhi auditor is yet to see as to whether the financial statement reflect a true and fair view, right? So I hope the definition of the term assertion is clear to all of you, right? Now, let us just have a look at some related topics given in your module with respect to this topic. So we have to come on page number 4.24, right? Now, the assertions that are there in the financial statements. So I gave you example of building. That building is of the value of, let's say, 20 CR. The historical cost is 20 CR. So just a minute. So when the management represents that the building historical cost is 20 CR, or let's say the value that is coming in the balance sheet is 20 CR. So basically, the management wants to represent that such a building actually exists. So this is not as such mentioned. It is one of the implied assertion, right? The company is having the right over that building. So rights and obligation. So obligation is with respect to the liabilities, right? So as such, the company or the management is not mentioning that this is owned by XYZ Limited, but it is implied, right? That this 20 CR is the complete building amount that should be shown in the financial statement. The valuation and allocation of this machine building is proper, right? So management is representing all these things auditor is going to check all these things only with respect to building, right? So now just recall your understanding starting from chapter number 1, chapter number 1, 2, and 3, wherever the term assertion was used. I hope your understanding with respect to that usage of term assertion is now very much clear, right? So basically, whatever management is telling in the financial statement, auditor is going to check each and every aspect of that information, that is the assertions. That is, in order to check, let's say, the existence assertion of the building, auditor is going to, let's say, he may perform the inspection. That is, physically, he may just inspect as to whether the building is there or not. With respect to rights, auditor will check what? He will check the, just a minute. Auditor is going to check what? The title deed, right? With respect to completeness, auditor may ask the management to, let's say, give a schedule of the building, and let's say to give a written representation that all the building or all the assets liability that should have been shown in the financial statement has actually been shown. With respect to valuation and allocation, the auditor, he may, recalculate the depreciation. He may inspect the depreciation schedule, right? So auditor is going to perform the various audit procedures that you are aware, that is ICAI ORR. The short form is this. So auditor is going to perform all these audit procedure in order to check the individual assertion. So with respect to building, auditor is going to perform these procedure. Same way with respect to plant and machinery. So these are what asset sides. With respect to liabilities, let's say share capital, right? So if any new issue of share has been there, fresh issue of share has been there, the minutes of the meeting, the resolution, right? The bank statements. So auditor is going to check each and everything with respect to that particular assertion, right? Same way, if you take the example of classes of transactions or events. So what are the transactions that may occur during the year? Let's say the sales transactions. So let's say the sales value is 2 CR, right? So now the management is representing that the sales of 2 CR have actually occurred. So see, you will not say that sales exist as on a particular day. You will say that sales have occurred during the year. So that is why occurrence assertion, though you can say the meaning behind both the words is same, but with respect to classes of transactions and events that have occurred during the year, so occurrence assertion. Now auditor is going to check this assertion only by performing the various audit procedures that you all are aware, right? Same way, completeness assertion. So when sales of 2 CR is shown, the management is asserting, or management is representing or declaring that the sales of 2 CR is the complete amount. So all sales have been shown. And again, auditor is going to perform audit procedures in order to check such assertion, right? Accuracy, that the value of 2 CR is accurate. So if there are any sales return, if there are any taxes, everything has been duly accounted for and it has been accurately measured, right? Cutoff. See, cutoff means, students, though we will be doing this in great detail when we will be doing chapter number 5, but for the purpose of this chapter, just try to understand. Cutoff means that the sales that are shown in the current year or the year under audit, they pertain to the correct accounting period. That is, it is not happening that the sales of the next year are also included here, or sale of the last year are included here. The sales pertaining to the correct current accounting period only have been shown in the P&L account. So this is the assertion that auditor, the management is, asserting. This is the representations by the management. And auditor is going to perform the audit procedure in order to check such assertion. Now, students, I would have asked you that what assertion, what audit procedure, but since the chat are disabled, but still on the other app, you can just send in your reply. Tell me what audit procedure the auditor can perform in order to check the cutoff with respect to sales. So on BOS Live, you can just send in your replies. So Sejal is saying inquiry. Others also please reply. See, in order to see cutoff, that is whether the sales pertain to the correct accounting period, or in the other terms, I can say whether the sales pertaining to the current year have been shown in the P&L of this year. So what audit procedures I can do? I can just inspect the invoices. I can just inspect the shipping documents in order to see whether the sales pertain to the correct accounting period or not, right? And then with respect to classification, so classification is, let's say the sales that has been included, it is not including any amount of indirect income. So the classification of the sale is correct or not. And we as auditor, we are going to check that assertion only, right? Same way, with respect to the class of transactions and the events and account balances, auditor is going to check the presentation and disclosure also. That is, whatever event has been disclosed, whatever transaction has been disclosed, it pertains to the entity, and it pertains to the whatever rights and obligations are there, whether they exist or not during that year or not, right? Same way with respect to presentation and disclosure completeness. That is, all disclosures that were supposed to be made, whether they have been made or not. Same way, classification and understandability, right? So the financial information is appropriately presented and disclosed, right? Accuracy and valuation, whatever disclosure has been made in the financial information and other information, the same has been accurately valued, right? So these are the assertions that the auditor is going to check, which have been made by the management itself. Is it clear, students? Is it clear? Yes, Dhanush, your messages are coming. Rihanna, you are correct. Checking date-wise bills, vouchers. Rajita, you are correct. Inquiry, yes. So, students, is the topic of assertion clear to all of you? One or two things are still left. I'll just discuss that with you. See, students, in case of Okay. So, see, when you are conducting the audit of a government company, right? One more very important assertion that the auditor is going to check is that the expenditure that has been made, that is been made with the proper authority. Sanction. That is, it has been sanctioned, it is within the sanction limit, and the same has been sanctioned by proper authority, right? Now, when we discuss about the term assertion, so assertion can be in the form of, it can be in the form of negative assertion also. So when in the notes to account, it is mentioned that no contingent liability exists. So this is a assertion that has been given, but this is a negative assertion. Why? Because no contingent liability exists. And in fact, it is what? It is an expressed negative assertion, because specifically it has been mentioned that no contingent liability exists. So expressly something has been mentioned. So this is what your expressed negative assertion. Now, let's say in the balance sheet, in the asset sides, building is not mentioned. All other things are there, like the furniture is there, plant and machinery is there. So building is missing, right? So this is what? Is it an implied negative assertion? Quickly send in your replies. Is it a implied negative assertion? Yes or no? Yes, Tanu, your messages are visible. Priyanka, your messages are visible. Send in your replies quickly. Can I call this situation that is whereby no building is mentioned and other assets are mentioned? Can I call it as implied negative assertion? So the answer is yes, right? Why? Because see, negative is what? Something is not existing. And this is implied. Now, if in the balance sheet, building is missing, I'll not assume, as a user of the financial statement or as an auditor, I'll not assume that building is there, but it has not been shown. What I'm going to assume? I'm going to assume that there is no building which has been owned by the company. Maybe the company has taken the building on the rent. If there is some building that is exists, so it is on rent. That is why it is not coming in the balance sheet asset side. So it is what? Implied negative assertion. Is it clear? Sejal, what do you want me to repeat? Kindly send in the specific query. And Dharini, your message is visible. Send in your replies. So it's good that those who want to study, they are actually sending their replies on the BOS Live app. That's really very appreciable. Right? So I hope this is clear. Now let me just take you through the module to discuss one example that is given in your module. So see, assertion. So when plant and machinery of 2 lakh has been shown with 70,000 at depreciation, 13,000 as depreciation for the year. So 70,000 is depreciation till the end of the previous year, right? So see, the assertions are as follows. The firm owns the plant and machinery. So is it mentioned somewhere that the firm owns this plant and machinery? No. This is what? Implied assertion, right? Then the historical cost of plant and machinery is 2 lakhs. The plant and machinery physically exists. So is it mentioned somewhere? No. It is again one of the implied assertion. The asset has been used in business of the company productively. This is again implied assertion. Total charge of depreciation is 83,000 to date and 13,000 relates to the year. So these amounts are expressly mentioned. The amount of depreciation has been calculated on recognized basis and calculation is correct. This is again implied. Now, this is the information that management has given. So the first part of definition of assertion, that is representations by management, explicit or otherwise, that are embodied in the financial statement, right? Now, the second part. So I, as an auditor, I am going to check each and every assertion by performing the audit procedure. So as used by the auditor, so what is the other part? As used by the auditor to consider different types of potential misstatement that may occur. This term, I am repeating it again and again. May is really very, very important. So I hope this is clear. Okay. And with respect to that negative assertion, see. So who can you explain again negative assertion? Tanu is saying, so yes, I'll do that. See, when in the balance sheet or let's say in the notes to account, it is mentioned that there is no contingent liability, right? So something in negative is there. And management is expressly asserting, representing that there is no contingent liability. So this is what expressed, that is something has been expressly mentioned, explicitly mentioned in the notes to accounts. Notes to accounts is also part of the financial statement, right? And something in negative is there because we are saying no. That word no has been used. So it is what? Expressed negative assertion. Is it clear, Tanu? And then let's say if building is missing in the balance sheet. So management is representing that there is no building. But is management expressly mentioning it? No. So this is what? Implied negative assertion. Tell me, if you just see a balance sheet of a company and there is no building, what are you going to assume? That there is no building that has been owned by that company, right? So this is what? Implied. And since no negative is associated, so negative assertion that the entity did not own any building on the balance sheet date. Tanu, is it clear? Now, this is really one of my favorite paragraphs because it really very beautifully explains why we are studying this concept of assertion, right? Why in the entire syllabus of auditing here and there, you are going to see the term assertion, right? So see, we are on page number 4.27 of your module. See, every financial statement contains overall representation in addition to specific assertions so far discussed. So an overall representation, that is the gross profit, the profit is this, net profit, gross profit, your balance sheets, all the items are given, right? So an overall representation plus specific assertions, है ना? Existence, occurrence, everything with respect to each item of the financial statement. So, for example, income statement purports to present results of operation. So, what are the results of operation? Your sale, your loss or profit, and balance sheet represents what? The financial position of the company, right? The auditor's opinion is typically directed to these overall representations. So, overall representation. But, student, if you remember, I told you at the very beginning of this chapter that if the auditor has to give his opinion on the financial statement as a whole, this he cannot give unless and until he verifies each and every assertion that is coming in the financial statement. So, see, the auditor opinion is typically directed to these overall representations, but to formulate and offer an opinion on the overall truth of these statements, he has first to inquire into the truth of many specific assertions, expressed or implied, positive or negative, that makes up each of these statements. Out of his individual judgments of these specific assertion, the various assertion with respect to, let's say, sales, the various assertions with respect to, let's say, purchases, with respect to, you can say, your inventories, with respect to the balance sheet items, with respect to assets, liabilities, income, expenses, disclosures, each and everything. So out of his individual judgments of these specific assertion, he arrives at a judgment on the financial statement as a whole. Is it clear why we are using the term assertion? And now, one more thing. Students, if I ask you that please verify the building that is coming to be 20 CR vis-a-vis a situation. So first situation is we are working as an audit team for XYZ Limited, and I ask you to verify the building, right, which is appearing to be 20 CR. This is the first situation. Second situation whereby I tell you that, okay, Tanu, you are supposed to verify the existence assertion of building. Okay, Sejal, you are required to verify, let's say, the valuation assertion of building. Okay, Dharini, you are required to verify, let's say, the presentation disclosure. Tell me the first situation or the second situation is a better situation, whereby basically my query is that in which situation you are able to, quickly know as to what audit procedure you are supposed to perform. Tell me, everyone, please reply. Which situation is the better situation whereby you are quickly able to know as to what audit procedure you are supposed to perform? Send in your replies on the BOS Live app. The second situation, Rajita is saying, absolutely correct. So if you are clear with the concept of assertion, this is going to, if you as an auditor are clear with the concept of assertion, this is going to help the auditor to conduct the audit in an effective and efficient manner. Because now you know that, okay, I have to check the existence assertion. So I'll perform the physical verification. Okay, I have to check the ownership assertion on the building. I'll quickly check the title deeds, right? Is it clear? So Dharini is saying second, Sejal is saying yes, ma'am. So basically, I was asking you as to whether this is clear to all of you or not, right? So is it clear? And this paragraph just beautifully summarizes the entire concept of term assertion. Is it clear? Shall we proceed with the next topic, which is audit trail? I hope negative assertion, implied negative assertion, expressed negative assertion is clear. So Rajita is saying clear, Mahalakshmi saying clear, Dharini saying clear, Sejal saying clear. Chalo, that's good, right? So the next topic is audit trail. Without looking at the module and the screen, tell me, what do you understand by the term trail, audit trail? Quickly send in your replies. Students, I'm waiting for your replies. So see, if you just look at the dictionary meaning of the term trail, it basically means a series of marks in a long line, right? So this is a very important topic. It is a new topic in this syllabus. So very important topic, a series. So I'll write it in red because this is just what the dictionary meaning. As such, you are not supposed to learn this. So it is a series of marks in a long line that is left by something that has moved, right? So this is the dictionary meaning. Let me just have a look at your replies also. So audit trail, Sejal saying where the information is coming from, how much changes have been done. Sejal saying it was there in the subject of GST. Chalo, that's good. So students see, the dictionary meaning says it is a series of marks in a long line that is left by something that has moved, right? So if you just look at a transaction, now consider a sales transaction in your mind, like how a sales transaction would have occurred, how it would have entered the accounting system, and how it would have been shown in the financial statements, right? Now read this dictionary meaning of term trail again, keeping in mind the sales transaction, a particular sale to XYZ Limited, how the same would have been initiated, the same would have been entered in the accounting records, and then how the same would have been disclosed, presented in the financial statement. So a series of marks in a long line. So this is a long line, the entire procedure, the sales initiated, agreement was there, some contracts were there, then let's say sales were made, the goods were, the risk and reward was transferred, invoice was there, the same was entered in the books of accounts, payment was received, right? So all these things that is left by something that has moved. So the transaction has moved from being a transaction to have been entered in the accounting records and then been shown in the financial statement. So what is the mark? What are the, so all these marks, all these evidence are what? The entire trail as to how that transaction have occurred, right? So now, let us just have a look at the definition that is given in your module, and that pertains to audit trail, right? So, documented flow of transaction. Documented flow of transaction. Keep in mind a sales transaction, right? Which is used to investigate how a source document has been translated into an accounting entry, and from there it has been reflected in financial statement. So I'll take you to the definition that is given. So because there I have written in short form. So audit trail is a documented flow of transaction as to how a source document was translated into accounting entry, and from there it was inserted into the financial statement of the entity. Is it clear? So how that sale transaction from being initiated to be entered into the accounting, to be translated into accounting entry, and then how the same is getting reflected in the financial statement. So a trail, like uh, the documented flow of the entire transaction. That is what is audit trail, right? Now, see, if there is a system whereby the company has a system of maintaining the audit trail. So, for example, like in case of banks, right? So there the audit trail is kept with respect to all your login activities. How many times you have logged into your, let's say, the internet banking, from which device you have logged in. So the entire trail. right, is there. So if the company is having any system to, to have that trail, right? So that the auditor can always use as an audit evidence, right? So that is why it says that it is used as audit evidence to establish the authentication and integrity of the transaction. Now, what is meant by authentication? Authentication is the genuineness. What is meant by integrity? The correctness of the transaction, right? So suppose there is any related party transaction, right? So auditor can always start from the very beginning and can have a look at the entire trail as to how such transaction has come into the financial statement. What was the starting document, how it came into your accounting records, and then how the same is reflected in the financial statement, right? So basically a step by step record. It is a step by step record of your accounting or the trade details or the other financial data, right? So auditor may use it to trace the source. Basically to use, it can be used to verify and track the accounting and the financial transaction, right? So it helps in see if there is a trail as to who has entered the transaction. Will it help in fixing the responsibility? Answer is yes. Will it, if any problem is there, will it help in thorough analysis of the problem area? Yes, because now you know that this is the entire trail, and you will be able to see as to where the problem has actually occurred, right? But see, if there is audit trail with respect to lakhs and lakhs of transactions, so analyzing such audit trail is going to involve cost as well as time, right? So this involves what? The analysis of such audit trail involves cost and time. But what is the solution to that? Auditor can always use all automated tools, right? We have seen in our chapter number 3, when we were doing data analytics, auditor may use various tools, computer aided audit techniques, right? So whereby auditor can always see as to, he can always analyze the audit trail, right? And if such feature is there, obviously that is going to increase the confidence of the user, of the auditor, as it is going to help him in order to see whether IC is operating effectively or not, right? So apart from checking the authenticity, integrity of the transaction, auditor can always use this audit trail in order to verify as to whether the IC is actually operating effectively or not. Why? Because when you just look at the trail, you will be able to see as to if any internal control was implemented, whether it has been operating effectively with respect to that particular audit trail. Is it clear? Is it clear? So audit trail, I hope you are able to understand that documented flow of transaction. So basically, if any sales transaction is there, so the company is having the entire trail as to from where it started, how it entered into the system, how the same is getting reflected in the financial statement. And if such a system is there, this is going to help the auditor, because auditor can always use it as an audit evidence to see as to whether to basically see, investigate the authenticity and integrity of the system, as well as with respect to the operating effectiveness of the internal control. Is it clear, students? Is it clear? Send in your replies quickly. Sejal, Mahalakshmi, Rajita, Tanu, Priyanka, Dharni. These are the students whose name I can see on the app. Rajita, Priyanka, Dhanush, Rihana. So Rihana is saying clear, understood. Priyanka saying yes, ma'am, clear. Tanu saying clear. Sunil saying clear. Chalo, that's good. Okay. So now the next topic is with respect to your management expert. Tell me, what do you understand by the term management expert? Do not look at the module. What do you understand by the term management expert? So new students have joined. Almas, Julie, please reply. Management expert. So good knowledge of management See, management's expert, right? So whenever we talk about this audit concept or the audit activity, I always take example like we are conducting the audit and the management of the client organization has prepared and presented the financial statement, implemented the internal control, right? Now, when the management of the client organization, they prepare and present the financial statement, they may have taken the services of the experts. For example, let's say legal expert, right? Advocates and solicitors with respect to various litigations that are going on. So whether a particular provision is to be made with respect to the litigation, what is the status of the litigation, or it is to be shown as a contingent liability. So basically, what can be the outcome of the litigation? So the services of legal expert may be used. Same way, let's say with respect to construction company. So in order to look at the percentage of the work that has been completed, so the services of civil engineers may be used. So these are what the expert services that is being used by the management. So it is not it doesn't it is not giving you a meaning that the person who is an expert in management. Nahi. We are saying the expert services that has been used by the management, right? So in fact, the definition of this term is given in your module. It is given on page number, just a minute. Page number 4.32, right? So see, who is a management expert? Again, a very, very important for 3 or 4 mark question. So an individual or organization possessing expertise in a field. See, tell me who are an expert in accounting and audit? Yes, Sejal, you are correct that management hires an expert for specific task, right? So tell me who are expert in auditing and accounting? So we auditors are the expert, right? So it says an individual or an organization possessing expertise in a field other than accounting and auditing, because uske liye to we are here, na? Whose work in that field is used by the entity to assist the entity in preparing the financial statement. So we are not referring to the experts with respect to accounting services or the auditing services, right? So the individual or organization possessing the expertise in the field other than accounting or auditing, and whose work in that field is used by the entity, by the management of the entity, to assist the entity in preparing the financial statement. To assist the entity in preparation of the financial statement. Is it clear? Sunil, your doubt or your reply is not clear, please specify. Is it clear? Right? So, any expert services that has been taken by the management for preparing the financial statement, but other than accounting and auditing, right? So, that is management expert. Now, what is the topic that we are going to study? See, if any information is to be used as audit evidence and that work has been done, that audit evidence is prepared using the work of management expert, right? So first of all, let me just tell you one more thing. If you remember in the earlier session, when we were discussing about the various sources of audit evidence or how the auditor can obtain audit evidence, there we have seen that the auditor may obtain audit evidence using the work of management expert. So yes, page number 4.12. So we saw that auditor may obtain audit evidence by performing the audit procedures, right? Then we saw that previous audits he can take. And then information that may be used as audit evidence may have been prepared using the work of the management expert. So SA 500 says that if any information has been prepared using the management experts ka work, right? So that can be used as an audit evidence. But see, you are an auditor of ABC Limited, and ABC Limited has used the service of civil engineers, right? It is a construction company in order to look at the, um, look at the percentage of completion or work in progress, right? So capital work in progress. So now tell me, before using the service of before using the information as audit evidence, and that information management has prepared using the service of management expert, tell me, you as auditor, will you consider something about the management expert? will you just try to see as to who is the management expert? What are the, let's say the competence, what is the competence level of that management expert? Tell me yes or no. Quickly send in your replies. Quickly send in your replies. Will you just straightforward rely on that information, or will you perform certain procedures in order to see whether that work is appropriate for the purpose of your audit? So Tanu is saying yes, ma'am, we will see. Dharin is saying yes. Sejal is say we will bring our expert and cross check. Others also please reply. See, answer is yes, auditor is going to consider some points, right? So when the auditor is going to use the information that is to be used as audit evidence, and that has been prepared using the work of management expert. So in order to determine the nature, timing, extent of his audit procedure with respect to that particular information, auditor is going to consider various matters. So what are those? First of all, auditor is going to consider the nature and complexity of the matter to which management experts relate. So what is the nature of that matter? What is the complexity, right? So as who was saying, Sejal was saying, we'll bring our own expert. So yes, auditor will see what is the nature and complexity. Is there a need for the auditor to involve his expert also, or is he in a position to understand the expert's work, right? So the nature and complexity of the matter to which the management experts relate, right? So let's say it is relating to calculation of certain accounting estimates. So whether auditor can also understand such work. So let's say if it is with respect to service of a civil engineer, so it might be possible that auditor might also have to involve certain expert, right? Then the risk of material misstatement, right? Availability of alternate source of audit evidence. So is any alternate source of audit evidence also available, right? The nature, scope, objective of management expert work. What is the nature, scope, objective of the management expert's work? So let's say if the service of any civil engineer has been taken, so let's say there might be a contract between the entity, the client, and that civil engineer company, right? So auditor will just go through the document. He'll just inspect that agreement in order to see the nature, scope, and objective of the management expert's work, whether the management expert is employed by the entity or is partly engaged by it to provide relevant service. So basically, whether it is in-house or the service is like taken from an outsource agency, right? The service has been outsourced. The extent to which management can exercise control and influence over the work of the management expert. So see, if let's say that management expert is a related party of the director of the company. So the company is in a position to exercise control and influence over that management expert. So auditor is going to consider that whether the management expert is subject to certain technical performance standards. So let's say any civil engineer is there, and he has membership of the professional body, right? So whether they have they are required to follow any technical performance standards or not, right? Then the nature extent of any controls within the entity over the management experts work. So let's say the company has outsourced certain work to civil engineer, but that work that is received from the management expert, that is internally also checked. So whether there are any controls within the entity over the management expert work, the auditor's knowledge and experience of the management experts field or expertise, again, Sejal, as you were saying, or is there a need to take services of any expert by the auditor also, the auditor's previous experience of the work of that expert. So last year maybe auditor has worked with that expert, and auditor's understanding is that that expert is not giving an objective opinion with respect to the client organization. So auditor will not rely, or he will not use the information that has been prepared using the management expert as an audit evidence. Auditor will perform some other audit procedures. So is it clear? So these are the various factors that the auditor is going to consider. Now, as many of you are saying, ma'am, how to learn these? See, just apply simple logic. Consider yourself in a situation that you are conducting the audit of ABC Limited, and you are considering as to whether the information that has been the your client has used certain information by using the and that information has been prepared using the services of the civil engineer, right? Now you have to decide whether you can use that information as an audit evidence. So what all you are going to consider, right? The risk of the risk of material misstatement in the matter. So if the risk of material misstatement is high, you may intend to, extend your nature timing extent of substantive checking. You may decide not to rely upon that or not to use that as an information, right? Is any alternate source of audit evidence available, right? What is the nature, scope, objective of management expert work? What is the nature and complexity? And with respect to nature and complexity, the point that you can relate is this: the auditor's knowledge and experience of the management expert work, right? Whether management expert is subject to some technical performance standards, or management is exercising any control, right? And if auditor is having any past experience, what was that experience with respect to that management expert? So if you just simply look at these points, you may find it, a bit difficult to learn, right? You may find, so I'm saying you may, right? But if you just look at the logic why these points auditor is going to consider, and if you just try to understand that logic and learn after understanding, I'm sure you are able to, prepare this. If I talk about this particular topic, I'm sure you are going to prepare this topic very well for your exams. Now tell me, for all those who are saying, ma'am, how to learn, tell me, is it clear? So how many points are there? 9, 10, 10 points. Tell me, are you able to learn 5 or 6 points? Tell me. Quickly send in your replies, because I always tell you, my endeavor sitting here giving you this session is that your understanding of concept should be clear. Also, you should be able to understand as to how to learn, also how to prepare for your exams. Quickly send in your replies. Sejal, Priyanka, Dharini, Tanu, Rajita, Sunil, Julie, Prihana, Mahalakshmi, Almas. So Rajita is saying, ma'am, very much clear. Priyanka is saying, yes, ma'am, we will try this way. Tanu is saying clear. Chalo, that's good. You should definitely try, and you should try today itself, right? Otherwise, then you say that, ma'am, our understanding in the session is clear, but after this session, we are not able to understand. So this should not happen. So Sejal is saying, yes, ma'am, it will be easy to learn at least 5 to 6 points. That good. That's good. Sunil is saying, yes, ma'am, understood. Rihanna is saying clear. Dharin is saying, yes, ma'am, we can learn. That's really very, very good. Right? Now, uh, see this next topic, it basically says if any information has been produced by the entity. So basically, if you are using any internal audit evidence, any information that is internally generated by the entity, so you are going to see as to whether, just a minute. You are going to see as to whether that information is accurate and correct, and that information is sufficiently precise. Precise is what? Correct, right? Accuracy and completeness, and your correctness you are going to consider. Okay, students, the next topic of your module, page number 4.29, that is paragraph number 1.11, A part, B part. I'm going to do when we will be doing essay 530 till here. Okay. So see, students, I always, take you through the module also, so as to make you familiar to your module also, because I always tell you that this is the base, this is the foundation this is the syllabus that you have to prepare. When you ask me that, ma'am, whether to do the your essays from pronouncements or from any other material, see, this is the base, the syllabus that is given in your module. Apart from this, Saransh, you can always use your model test papers, your MTPs, RTPs, that you can always use. But when you have to prepare for your examination, consider the entire module, right? The illustration, the examples, all that will help you in preparing, understanding for your exams, right? Now tell me, we have understood a lot about audit evidence. Now, if you are the auditor of a company and of any of your client company, and you have a doubt over the reliability of an audit evidence, or the audit evidence that you have obtained from one source is inconsistent with the audit evidence that you have obtained from the other source. So let's say you have checked a sales invoice or the sales total of sales with respect to a particular client, a particular third party, particular debtor, right? So the balance that is coming in the books is 5 lakhs, but when you obtain an external confirmation from that party has given you a confirmation of 5.5 lakhs. Now there is what inconsistency. One audit evidence is saying something else, the other audit evidence is saying something else. That is 5 lakhs in your the books of accounts of the client, that is the invoices, and 5.5 from the confirmation. Now what is the course of action available for the auditor? Will auditor straightforward, withdraw from that auditing assignment? Tell me. Or will he just mention in the audit report that the financial statement do not reflect a true and fair view? Tell me, what will auditor do? Very simple. He'll perform what? So, yes, Priyanka is saying we will increase our checking. Sejal is saying we will further investigate and ask management. Yes. So auditor is going to modify the nature, timing, extent of his audit procedure. See, he determined certain audit procedure, the nature, timing, extent of certain audit procedure. He performed those. After obtaining the audit evidence, he found that there is some inconsistency, right? Or let's say he has a doubt over the reliability of any information. So he'll not just straightforward withdraw from that engagement. What auditor can do, he'll just determine as to what modification and or additions to the audit procedure he should do in order to resolve that matter. है He may perform certain other audit procedures. Let's say he has obtained certain external confirmation over which he is having some doubts. So he may resend that confirmation request. He may ask the management to provide him with a written representation specifically with respect to that data. So what is he doing? He is adding his audit procedures to resolve that matter. Right? Is it clear? He may inquire the management. So, example, responses to inquiries of management, internal audit, and others are inconsistent. So, if there is certain inconsistency, he is going to perform certain additional audit procedure. And whatever additional audit procedure he has determined to do, he'll maintain a documentation of those and how that inconsistency was resolved. What was his final conclusion? He's going to document that also. Is it clear? Is it clear? Yes, Rajita, you are saying nahi. Rajita, nahi. You have not mentioned it correctly. Abhi straightforward, thodi na you will withdraw from the audit engagement. Auditor will perform additional audit procedures na. हाँ, उसके बाद भी let's say the management is not cooperating, he is not able to obtain any audit evidence, and that particular matter is very much material, then he'll consider as to whether that is going to have an impact on his audit report, right? And that we are going to study in detail in chapter number 8 as to the various modifications in the audit report that the auditor can do. Rajita, is it clear? Is it clear? So now we are, and one more topic is left with respect to management expert. So see, when we were looking at the various matters the auditor is going to consider when he has to use the work of the management expert, he has to use that as an audit evidence. So before relying on the work of management expert, auditor is also going to see 3 things with respect to management expert, that is the competence, That is the competence, capability, and objectivity of that expert. What is the competence? What is the capability and objectivity of the expert is whether that expert is able to work in an unbiased way without being influenced by the client organization. Obtain an understanding of the work of that expert, right? And evaluate the appropriateness of that expert's work for that relevant assertion. So the assertion for which you want to check, if for which you want to use that information as an audit evidence, so whether actually it is relevant for that assertion or not, auditor is going to consider that. Is it clear? Sejal, we will do this topic later on with respect to withdrawing. Chapter number 8 में we will see. ठीक है? Is this topic clear? So this is also a very good question. A 3 or 4 mark question can straightforward come. So you may get a situation that, let's say, you are conducting the audit of ABC Limited, and while conducting the audit, you came across that the company ABC Limited has used the services of civil engineers. What are the when the information and you are going to use that, right? So what are the information with respect to the management expert that you are going to consider when you have to use the information that has been used preparing the work of management expert? So with respect to the management expert, you are going to see its competence, capability, objectivity, understanding of the work of the expert, and appropriateness of the expert work to be used as audit evidence for the relevant assertion. Is it clear? Right? So till page number 4.32, we have covered the module in entirety. There were certain illustrations that were there, and I have asked you in the last session to go through those as a homework. I am expecting that you all have gone through those questions and that you are not having any doubt in that, right? In case still you have any doubt, you can always send in your queries, right? Except for 3 topics, that is, I have asked you uh, 1.11 on page number 4.29, page number 4.30 and 31 till audit sampling wala. That I have left because that I'll be covering in this chapter later on when we will be doing essay 530. Now we will be starting with essay 610 using the work of internal auditors. And in the last session, I have asked you to just go through these pages of essay 610. I hope you all have done that. So tell me whether, give me replies to 2 of my questions. First of all, is are all the topics till page number 4.32 clear to all of you? Send in your replies. And the illustrations that you were asked to go through in the last session. Is everything clear? Any doubt, you can always send in your doubt. Okay. Now tell me, have you gone through the pages of SC 610? And if your answer is no, next time it should not be no, right? So next time, so today I'll be telling you the topics that I'm going to cover in the next session. So you should make sure that before coming for the session, just spend 5 minutes, not more than that, in just going through the pages that we are going to cover in the next session. Sejal, kindly elaborate what do you want me to do? Kindly just reframe your query. So Sejal is saying illustrations are clear. That's good. Quickly send in your query, students, so that we can start with essay 610. A very important essay and very interesting. So Sejal, I am waiting for a reply. Yes, Rishita, the Zoom app chat is disabled. It will be enabled in the last 15 minutes, right? So you can send in your queries here on this app, right? And Sejal is saying, ma'am, when I read an illustration, I feel I know the answer. And I'm sure that after understanding the concepts and the way we discuss, I'm sure that you are able to write that answer also. Because students, I always tell you that students often tell me that, ma'am, we have a complete understanding of the topic, right? But when it come to writing the paper, we fall short of words. So this should not happen with you, right? And how will that be possible? See, two or three steps are there. So, listening to these sessions carefully with concentration, then going through the module immediately after the session, preparing your notes, asking your queries, interacting in the session with the like replying to the queries that I'm asking. And as I always say, consider this module as your basis of preparing for your exam. Just go through each every page, right? All the illustrations, the case scenarios, case study that are given in your module, consider those. Go through them once, twice, thrice. I'm sure you will be able to answer each and every practical based question also. Why? Because if your concepts are clear, and in the session also, students, my endeavor is to, wherever topics are coming, whereby the practical questions can come. So I always give you a situation that, let's say this is happening, then what will be the answer? So just listen to these sessions carefully, and then immediately after the session, you should go through the module. And I have told you that, see, we have 5, 6 lectures for this chapter. So, like maximum 24 or 23 pages I cover in a one session. So, reading 24 or 23 pages, 23, 24 pages will hardly take 40, 45 minutes or maximum 1 hour. So, itna to you can devote towards reading the study. So, Sejal, then if you just follow all these things, she's saying, I don't know how to express it. You will be able to express your answers in a very good manner. But yes, ye to aapko hard work to you will have to do, right? Just try it for a week now, that whenever the session ends, today itself, like after the, in that particular day only when the session ends, you make sure that you go through the module till where we have studied, right? And when the next session is scheduled, just before coming for the session, go through that topic again. Just spend 10, 15 minutes plus 5 minutes to the topic that we are going to do. Itna to you can always, you can and you should do. Is it clear? So Tani is saying, ma'am, can you summarize management expert? Yes, I can. So basically, the thing is, when we studied the topic of various sources of audit evidence, we saw that auditor may use the information that has been prepared using the work of management expert as an audit evidence. But see, we are giving an expert opinion, so we will not just blindly, have trust with respect to that information. We will apply our professional judgment. We will, perform various audit procedure in order to see whether that work is appropriate or not. So let's say if the work of civil engineer has been used and percentage of completion of that building, let's say the company is into a construction company, so percentage of completion has been used in order to see the capital work in progress. So that amount has been used by the organization in preparing the financial statement in the balance sheet. So now we as an auditor will try to understand as to whether we are able to understand that calculation, or is there a need to take service of another expert, right? Whether the management expert, the service, the civil engineer whose services has been used by the management, whether that civil engineer firm or the company, whether that is competent capability, whether it has the competence, capability and objectivity. ऐसे तो नहीं है that it is, influenced by the management, right? So auditor is going to take an understanding of all those matters, right? Is it clear, Tanu? Nahi, whose doubt was it? Tanu, yes. Is it clear? Chalo, that's good. So shall we start with essay 610? Yes, we will start. So what is the name of the essay? Using the work of internal auditor. Using the work of internal auditors, essay 610. ठीक है. So students, see, in a company, in a client organization, the management is responsible for preparation, presentation of financial statement and implementation of internal control, right? Now, within the company, there can be internal audit department and management or those charged with governance. They are going to make that internal audit department, right? Now, why we are studying this SA 610? See, the objective of external auditor, statutory auditors, that is, like I always say, we as auditors. So thereby I want to say we as external auditors of the company. So when, let's say, the external auditor has to conduct the audit, the ultimate objective is what? To express an opinion on the financial statements, right? Whether the financial statement reflect a true and fair view. This is our objective as per SA 200. You all have studied it in detail. That is to obtain a reasonable assurance as to whether the financial statement as a whole are free from material misstatement, whether due to fraud and error, and to report in accordance with SA. You all have done that. Now, the internal auditor of the client organization. So it is one of the function of the entity itself. So entity has an internal audit department for its own purpose, for achieving the purpose which pertains to the entity, not the external auditor. So if you just look at the external auditor and the internal auditor, the objectives may be different, right? But when the internal auditor, they are required by the management to check the financial statement. So internal audit department ka to, they will be having a duty to, see as to whether the financial statements are, the internal control with respect to financial statements are fine or not. So the procedures that the internal auditor is going to perform may be similar to the procedures that the external auditor is going to perform with respect to checking the financial statement, right? So the external auditor may use the work of the internal auditor as audit evidence, or the external auditor may use the internal auditors to perform certain audit procedures in order to avoid undue excess usage of internal audit function or the internail auditors by the external auditors. We are studying SA 610. So what is the extent to which the external auditor may use the internal audit function, right? What are the ways how which the external auditor may use such function? What are the areas where external auditor should not use the internal audit function or the internal auditors? So this we are going to study when we'll be discussing SA 610, that is using the work of internal auditors. Is it clear? So tell me, is like the picture that I just tried to draw in your mind with respect to internal auditor, the external auditor, is it clear that what we are going to study in internal in this SA 610? Quickly send in your replies. So what is internal audit function, right? So see, it is a function of an entity. So abhi external auditor has nothing to do with this function. वो तो internal, this is basically internal to the entity, right? So it is a function of an entity that performs, just a minute, that performs assurance consulting activities designed to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of entities governance, risk management, internal control processes. Abhi, I know you are saying what ma'am has said. See, Sejal, your doubt will be clear. Just listen to this discussion. So I hope you all are clear with the objective of the external auditor, statutory auditor. So the objective is to express an opinion on the financial statement as to whether they represent a true and fair view or not, right? Right. And we as auditor, external auditors, we as such are not giving our opinion on the internal controls implemented by the organization, except for what we have read in section 143, subsection 3, clause I of the Companies Act 2013. We have done that topic in chapter number 3, right? Now, what is an internal audit function? So it is the function of an entity. that performs certain activities for the entity only. So entity may I mean the maybe those charged with governance ko they'll be reporting, maybe management ko they will be reporting, right? And what are those activities relating to evaluation and improving the effectiveness of? So evaluating and then suggesting the means to improve the effectiveness of three things. What are those three things? Entities governance. This governance is what? The system by which that organization is controlled, by which the organization is operated, right? So entities governance, entities risk management, entities internal control processes. ठीक है? So internal audit function is function of an entity which provides two keywords: assurance and consulting activities. Why? To evaluate and then improving the effectiveness of three things. What are these three things? Just keep in mind, very important: entities governance, the way the entity is operated, it is been controlled, right? The risk management, the way the entity identifies the risk, right? The internal control processes. So internal audit function. So tell me, in the entire definition, can you see that, are you able to see that the services of the internal audit function is for the entity only? External auditor has nothing to do as such. Is it clear to all of you? So it is a function of an entity. Why? To provide assurance. So assurance is what? Giving a confidence that your risk management process is good, that the company's internal control processes are good, right? Or consulting activities, that is recommending the ways to improve it. If it is not good, then recommending the ways to improve it. So evaluating and improving the effectiveness of entities governance, risk management, and internal control processes. So tell me, is this definition clear? Sejal, your doubt is not clear to me. That company functions are good to the auditor. Please specify. Please reframe your query. Okay, so you can see that internal audit function is for the entity. Entity want the internal audit department to tell the management or the those charged with governance that how to, improve its governance, the risk management, the internal control processes. Okay. Okay. Now, what are the various activities that the internal audit function perform or the internal audit department of an organization perform? So we have seen there will be activities relating to governance, there will be activities relating to risk management, and there will be activities relating to the internal control. We are going to see all these activities one by one. ठीक है, but उससे पहले I want all of you to reply because I have not received reply from all of you. Let me just have a look at your queries. Tanu, abhi don't, just wait, do not conclude. Abhi, the line that you have mentioned is not correct. ठीक है? So abhi ke liye just you understand that internal audit function is there for whose benefits? For the entity's benefit. ठीक है? And it is with respect to entities governance, the risk management, evaluating and improving the effectiveness of entities governance, risk management, and internal control processes. Okay. Now, activities relating to governance. So I told you, just a minute. I told you what is meant by governance. It is basically the system, how the entity is been operated, how this entity is been controlled, right? So whether that system is, the internal audit function is going to evaluate that system, right? And it is going to perform various activities relating to governance. That is, it will assess the governance process in accomplishment of the entity's objective on ethics, value performance, accountability, communicating risk, effectiveness of communication among those charged with governance, external, internal auditors, management, right? So basically, internal audit function will see whether all these, it will evaluate whether the management, the client, the company's governance system is fine or not, right? With respect to ethics, with respect to value performance, communication of risk, effectiveness of communication among those charged with governance, external, internal auditors ka communication, management ka communication. So all these activities, the internal audit function is going to perform to evaluate and then to suggest any improvement, right? Same way, activities relating to risk management. That is, it will assist the entity by just a minute. It will assist the entity by identifying and evaluating the significant exposure to risk, improvement of risk management and internal control. It will perform procedure to assist the entity in detection of frauds. So it is the work of internal audit function. Okay? That is risk management. Then activities relating to internal control, evaluation of internal control, examination of financial and operational information, review of operating activities, review of compliance with laws and regulations. So it is the duty of the internal audit function. So the explanation of these 4 points, I'll just take you through the module. So we have done this definition of internal audit function. Then we saw activities relating to governance, activities relating to risk management, and now we'll be doing activities relating to internal control. We are on page number 4.33 of your module. Okay? So when we say activities relating to internal control, there are 4 activities. One relating to what? Your internal control. Then the activities relating to financial and operating information. Then activity relating to operating activities. And then with respect to laws and regulations, right? So with respect to the internal control, what are the activities that internal audit function going to perform? It will review the control, it will evaluate their operation, and it will recommend the improvements. So if you just ask me that, ma'am, what are the keywords? So I hope you are aware, you are able to see. So review the controls, evaluate the operation, and recommend the improvements. Okay? Then, with respect to examination of financial and operating activity, it will see as to how the company is identifying, recognize, measuring, classifying, and reporting the financial and operating information, right? So, how the means that the company is using to identify, recognize, measure, classify, report the financial and operating information. And the internal audit function, if required, so let's say, while checking this, internal audit department finds that the accounting estimates may, it is not, recognizing such amount or measuring such amount, the finance department is not doing that properly. So making specific inquiry into individual items, including detailed testing of transaction balances and procedure. See, functions are same that or external auditor is also going to do. This is what external auditor also does. But then external auditor is independent of the client organization. Here, internal audit function is what? It is a function of the entity itself. So it is not independent of that entity, right? Then reviewing of operating activities. So basically the EEE, economy, efficiency, and effectiveness of the operating activities, non-financial activities. So economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. So we external auditors, are we concerned as such with the operating effectiveness of or the economy, efficiency, effectiveness of the operating activities? No. Unless and until it is having some financial impact, we as such are not concerned, right? Then compliance with laws and regulations. The internal audit function may be assigned to review compliance with laws, regulations, external requirements, internal management policies and directives, and other external requirements. So is it clear? I hope now you are able to understand as to what is the function of the internal audit department of an entity. First of all, it is not independent as such of the entity. It is a function of the entity itself. Why? Because entity wants to ensure that whether the internal control, whether the risk management, and whether the governance, all these things, whether these are proper or not, effective or not, right? And if not, and who is given this function? The internal audit department. They are going to evaluate them and improve the effectiveness of these things. What activities the internal audit function is going to perform? We have just seen that activities relating to governance, relating to risk management and internal control. Now we have had a discussion with respect to external auditor ka objective. In fact, you have gone through that topic when you were doing chapter number 1. Tell me, are you able to demarcate or are you able to differentiate as to what is the objective of the external auditor vis-a-vis what is the objective of the internal audit function? Now tell me whether it is clear. So earlier I told, I think Tanu, that abhi it is too fast to conclude, and Sejal. Now tell me, are you clear? Yes, Sejal, it is clear there is a requirement, but abhi we are not going to do that because that is not in your syllabus. ठीक है? So tell me, is that demarcation, is that differentiation clear? Quickly send in your replies. Tanu is saying clear, others also, Rishita saying clear, Rihana saying clear, Sejal saying clear. So abhi tak we haven't, so the external auditor as such haven't come into this picture of SA 610. Abhi the main character is internal auditor only, and we have just understood as to what is an internal audit function and why is an internal audit function there in a company. Okay? So we will do one thing here, students. We will just take a quick break of 15 minutes, and after the break, we'll try to finish this essay. And in case you have any query, you can always send in on the BOS Live app, and we will be will enable the Zoom chat in the last 15 minutes for resolving any of your queries. Okay? So a quick break of 15 minutes here. Okay, thank you. Students, I hope you all are back after the break. So we were discussing SA 610, that is the using the work of internal auditors, right? So before the break, we have understood the internal audit function, the meaning, and why the entity has an internal audit function, right? So now let us proceed further. Right? So see, I told you when we were discussing this point, examination with respect to the financial and operating information, and then compliance with laws and regulations. So you can see that, see, the with respect to the financial statement, the functions that the external auditor and internal auditor may perform can be similar, right? So if you have to see whether there is compliance with law and regulation, compliance or not with law and regulation, procedures can be same, which are followed by internal auditors and external auditors, right? Though the objectives of both external auditor and internal auditor are different, right? So since the procedures, the audit procedures that are performed by the internal auditor and external auditor, so both are auditors, so I'm saying audit procedures, so they can be similar. So the external auditor may make use of the function of internal audit in various ways, right? So while the objectives of the entity's internal audit function and the external audit differ, so objectives are different, but they may perform audit procedures similar to those performed by external auditor in the audit of financial statement, because we have seen one of the activities for the internal auditor is examination of financial and operating information in compliance with laws and regulations. So such audit procedures can be similar. So external auditor may make use of the internal audit function for the following purposes. So three purposes are given. What are those? To obtain information that is relevant to the external auditor's assessment of risk of material misstatement due to fraud and error. So when the external auditor has to obtain the information with respect to the assessment of risk of material misstatement, so it may use the information from the internal audit department, right? Or the external auditor may decide to use the work of the internal audit function. Now, what is the difference between point number second and third? Third says may use internal auditor under the direction, supervision, review of external auditor. So I hope the first point is clear. That is, in order to assess the risk of material misstatement, the external auditor may use the internal audit function to obtain the information relevant for assessing the risk of material misstatement. So let's say if the external auditor has to obtain certain information, it may inquire the internal audit department that, okay, tell me this, tell me that, in order to assess the risk of material misstatement. First is this, relating to assessment of risk of material misstatement, right? Now, the second and third point says that the external auditor may decide to use the work performed by internal audit function. What does that mean? It means that the internal audit function, whatever work they have done or they are planning to do, the external auditor may use that work as audit evidence. So the way we did, using the information in which management expert has been involved as audit evidence. So same way, the work that has been done by the internal audit function, the auditor may use any of such reports, any of such calculations as an audit evidence. First, or you can say the second point is pertaining to that particular situation, whereby you are using the work which has been done or it has been planned to done by the internal audit function, and you are taking that report as an audit evidence. So this is just an example that you are taking a report as an audit evidence, right? The third point, so basically the second situation, that is, now listen to this carefully. I hope second is clear. That is, the work that has been done by the internal audit function, you are using that work. Okay? The third point says that you are using the internal auditors to perform certain procedures for you under your direction, supervision, and review. So you are here what? External auditors. So the external auditor is using the internal auditor. So यहाँ पर तो उनका work was used and यहाँ पर the internal auditor has been used. Under the direction, supervision, review of external auditor. See, when the external auditor, we have studied this in chapter number 1, 2, and 3, that if the external auditor is having any team which is working on the audit, the external auditor should direct, supervise, and review that team. If you remember, we have done various factors also that is going to determine the extent of such direction, supervision, review. So if you're using the internal auditors, you are going to direct, supervise, and review them also, because ultimately the external auditor is responsible for his opinion, right? Is it clear? So are you able to understand the difference between 2 and 3? So I'm sure that if you just keep in mind these diagrams, the difference is going to be very much clear to you. So the second point says that here the external auditor may decide to use the work performed by internal audit function. So the work that has been performed by the internal audit function, it can be any report, it can be any calculation that has been used by the external auditor as an audit evidence. And here it is using the internal audit team. It is using the team, the internal auditors to perform certain audit procedures for the external auditors. But yes, if they are using DSR, that is the direction, supervision, review should be there. And when this third situation takes place, we call it as direct assistance. So directly assisting the external auditor, directly performing certain work for external auditor under under the direction, supervision, review of the external auditor. And यहाँ पर what is been used? The work that has already been planned or that will be performed by the internal audit function. Tell me the 3 points, are they clear? So the first point is with respect to the risk of material misstatement के assessment पे, if any information is to be obtained. Second and third, it says that try to understand the difference between both the points. Second point says that the external auditor may decide so let me just take you to the module. So it says that unless prohibited or restricted to some extent by law regulation, the external auditor, after appropriate evaluation, may decide to use work that has been performed by internal audit function during the period in partial substitution for audit evidence to be obtained directly by the external auditor. So let's say if the external auditor had to obtain certain audit evidence, had to perform certain calculations, but that has already been performed by the internal auditor. So can that information that has already been done by the internal audit department, that has been generated by the internal audit department, can that be used? It can be used as a partial substitution of the audit evidence to be obtained directly by the external auditor. But see, it is specifically mentioned after appropriate evaluation, because ultimately external auditor is responsible. And the third point says, unless prohibited, restricted to some extent by law regulation, the external auditor may use internal auditors. So यहाँ पर it is not saying information produced. So what was there? May decide to use work that has been performed. So work that has already been performed, right? So, or may be performed by the internal audit department for their purpose. So for their department. But now it is the external auditors are using that as an audit evidence. But here it says that may use the internal auditors to perform audit procedures. Very, very important. To perform audit procedures under the direction, supervision, review known as direct assistance. Tell me now the 3 points, are you able to understand? And more specifically, more importantly, difference between the second and third points. Quickly see, I want to finish this essay today itself. So the 2 points, I hope the last 2 points are also clear, the difference. Okay? Sending your replies. Meanwhile, I'll just take you through the scope also. So what is the scope? So the scope of this essay 610, is that basically it deals with the auditor's responsibility in using the work of internal auditor. And now to you all know, second and third point we have done, how the external auditor can use the work of external auditor, either using the, just a minute, either using work of internal audit function or the direct assistance. See, using work of internal audit function, Dharini is asking me to repeat this. See, it basically means, see, let's say with respect to certain cost calculations, the internal audit function department has already performed certain calculations. They had prepared certain cost sheets, certain spreadsheets have already been prepared by the internal audit department, right? Now, after evaluating, so we have seen that internal audit department say auditor, the external auditor may use that function. So the external auditor may use that information that is been prepared, that has already been prepared by the internal audit department as audit evidence. So yahan par it is not happening that external auditor is saying to the internal auditor that do all these works, I am directing, supervising and reviewing you. That is not happening. Yahan pe what is happening, that internal audit department is already required to do something because they are the internal audit department. External auditor hasn't said anything to them to do. But that work is of importance to the external auditor also. So after evaluating that work, the external auditor may use that work, right? Whereas in the second point, we are saying the external auditor may tell the internal auditor that please perform this procedure and I will be directing, supervising and reviewing that work. Is it clear, Dharini? Acha, first point you are saying. So first point is basically with respect to assessment of risk of material misstatement. To obtain information that is relevant in external auditors assessment of risk of material misstatement due to fraud and error. So if you remember when we started with SA 315 and I told you about risk assessment procedures, I told you what is the first procedure that you are going to perform. You all said inquiry. So the external auditor may just inquire the internal audit department. Okay, tell me about the internal control. Okay, tell me about the various risks associated. So obtain information that is relevant to the external auditor's assessment of risk of material misstatement due to fraud and error. That is, जब he is performing the risk assessment procedure, he may obtain certain information from the internal auditors. Dharini, is it clear? Is it clear? ठीक है. So the scope of SA 610, it basically deals with the using the work of the internal auditor function or using the direct assistance. ठीक है. Now I'm repeating it again and again. If you just see, it says that unless prohibited by law or regulation, right? And then it says that after appropriate evaluation. So see, ultimately, it is the external auditor who is responsible for his opinion that he's going to give on the financial statement. So he cannot say at the end that, see, I gave this opinion because I relied upon the work of the internal auditors. So I cannot be held responsible of negligent or anything like that. Because ultimately he is going to sign it. He is responsible for the opinion that he is giving. If he want to use the internal audit function, he may use it, but he has to apply his professional judgment. He has to, ultimately, the sole responsibility is that of the external auditor only. Sole responsibility for his opinion. So see, the external auditor has the sole responsibility for the audit opinion expressed, and that responsibility is not reduced by the external auditor's use of the work of the internal audit function or the internal auditors to provide direct assistance on the engagement. Is it clear? So why are we reading SA 610? So I told you in the very beginning. So SA 610 we are reading to provide a framework for the external auditor's judgment regarding use of work of internal auditor to prevent undue or overuse of such work. So in this essay, students will be studying as to these are the areas where the external auditor should not use the function of internal audit, right? These are the areas where it can use, right? This is the way the auditor can use or cannot use. So we are going to see all these things. So it basically provides you the, so the keyword here is what? It provides you the framework what the external auditor's judgment regarding the use of the internal audit function, internal auditors to prevent what? The undue or overuse of such work. Is it clear? So till page number 4.35, is it clear, students, what we are going to study in SS 610? So the basic concept should be clear, what we are studying and why we are studying SS 610. So we have seen sole responsibility किसका है, ठीक है? So it basically provides you with the framework to prevent over and undue use of such work. ठीक है? Now, what is the objective of the auditor? When the company is having the internal audit function. So see, abhi we are not saying कि direct assistance हो रहा है या work use हो रहा है. Abhi we are not referring to that. We are just saying that internal audit department is there. As per SS 610, what is the objective of the auditor? So see the auditor. So whenever students, I'll say auditor, I mean external auditor. But where I have to say internal auditor, I'll specifically mention that. Okay? So when the external auditor sees that with respect to his client, there is an internal audit department. So the three things the external auditor is going to consider are, he'll determine, or the external auditor is going to determine whether the work can be used or not, in what areas can be used, and to what extent. Whether it can be used or not, is it prohibited by law regulation? In which areas that work can be used? Is it with respect to cost calculation? Is it with respect to some assets, depreciation, and to what extent, right? Then, having determined that yes, the work can be used, whether that work is adequate for the purpose of the audit. See, if the work cannot be used, law and regulation prohibits the usage of such work. Is it required to check the adequacy of that work? No. So that is why the second point is what? Whether that work is adequate for the purpose of audit or not. And then in case of direct assistance, to appropriately direct, supervise, review the work. So basically, if you're using the internal audit function, whether that work is adequate for the purposes of audit or not, and in case of direct assistance, the auditor is going to appropriate, directly supervise and review the work. So a 3 or 4 mark question can directly come, that objectives of the auditor as per SS 610. And students, I'm repeating it again and again. Such detailed essay 610 is for the first time in your syllabus. So a very important essay. You can, for example, with respect to this topic only, you may get a 3 or 4 mark practical based question, that you are appointed as auditor of ABC Limited and you see that there is an internal audit function. So what will be your objectives in terms of SA 610? Okay, so you will determine whether that internal audit function can be used, in which areas, to what extent. Having made that determination, whether that work is adequate for the purposes of audit, and in case of direct assistance, to appropriately direct, supervise and review the work. This is the objective of the auditor. Okay. Now, when the auditor is evaluating that whether to use the work of the internal audit function, if you remember, when we did management work, expert ka work, we saw that auditor will see the capability, competence, objectivity of the management, obtain an understanding, and whether it is relevant for the auditor's purpose or not. We just did that topic right before the break. Here also, there is a topic, that evaluation of the internal audit function. So when you are going to use the work of the internal audit function, or maybe the internal auditors, you are going to evaluate three things. What are those? Objectivity of the internal auditors. So whether they can act in an unbiased way or not. Objectivity is what? Impartial, right? So whether they are influenced by the management, right? Competence level of the internal audit function, right? And whether the internal audit function applies a systematic, disciplined approach, including quality control. So these are the 3 points. And in fact, how to determine all these 3 points, we are going to just see. So what are these 3 things? When the auditor is evaluating the internal audit function, he'll see the objectivity of internal auditors. So I'm saying when the auditor, so I mean when the external auditor is evaluating the internal audit function. So objectivity of internal auditors, competence level of the internal audit function, whether internal audit function applies systematic disciplined approach including quality control. Just tell me, if the internal auditors are not objective, they are not biased, they are not unbiased, or you can say they are biased, their decision is influenced by the management, tell me, will you use the internal audit function or the internal auditors? Quickly send in a reply, a yes or no. Quickly send in your replies. Or if they are not systematic, there is no discipline, there is no quality control within the internal audit function, can you use? Or if they are not having that competence level that is required, will you use that function? Sejal, Dharini, Tanu are saying no, absolutely correct, right? So, uh, since, see, we are giving an expert opinion, we can rely on the work of the internal auditor, but yes, before that, we are going to evaluate certain things. So objectivity of internal auditors, competence level of internal audit function, whether internal audit function applies a systematic disciplined approach, including the quality control. Now you may ask me that, ma'am, how auditor is going to evaluate that? So this is what is the next topic, that is objectivity and its evaluation. So when the external auditor has to consider the objectivity of the internal audit department, how to evaluate. Same way, when the external auditor has to evaluate the competence of the internal auditor, how to do that. And same way, when the external auditor has to evaluate whether a systematic and disciplined approach has been followed by internal auditors or internal audit department, how to do that is the next topic, right? And very simple. See, objectivity. What is meant by objectivity? That the internal audit department is able to function without any bias, in an impartial way, without being influenced by the entity. Okay? So objectivity refers to the ability to perform the task without allowing bias, conflict of interest, undue influence of others to override the professional judgment. That means the internal auditor should be able to apply their professional judgment also where they are required to apply. Now, what are the factors that the external auditor may consider in evaluating the objectivity? See, tell me if, let's say, there are certain restrictions on the internal auditors that they cannot communicate with the external auditor. Tell me, is objectivity there? Yes or no? There are restrictions that you cannot communicate, let's say, with those charged with governance. First, you have to communicate with the with the management. If management will allow, then only you can talk to the external auditor or the audit committee. So can you say objectivity is there? Answer is no. Same way, let's say the area where the external auditor wants to use the work of the internal audit function. So let's say that work has been done by the internal auditor themselves, the internal audit team itself. Tell me, will there be objectivity in the second situation? Just write two, yes or no. So that work has been done by the internal auditors. Will there be objectivity? Send in your replies. So the answer is a big no. Why? Because there will be self-review thread then. You all have done, right? So again, no, right? So Sejal, is your answer yes or no? So my question was, if the work has been done by internal audit team itself, so let's say with respect to certain calculations of accounting estimates, the internal audit team have made that calculations. So can auditor use, external auditor use them to review that work? Answer is no. ठीक है. So objectivity को कैसे देखेंगे? Objectivity is basically what? That the internal auditor, they are able to work without any biasness, without conflict of interest, without undue influence of the others to override their professional judgment. So what are the factors? First of all, the ability of the internal audit function to be free of bias, conflict of interest, or undue influence. So whether the internal audit function reports to those charged with governance or an officer with appropriate authority. So see, it should not happen. So let is, take an example, you are conducting the audit of ABC Limited, internal audit department is there, and that internal audit department has to communicate with the management only. So now let's say the internal audit department, they became aware of any fraud that management has committed. Now they are reporting it to the management. They are not allowed to report it to those charged with governance. They are not allowed to report it to the external auditors. So will there be objectivity? Answer is no. Why? Because there is undue influence of the management, right? Is it clear? Or whether those charged with governance oversee employment decisions relating to internal audit function. So students, if you remember, I have discussed with you the difference between those charged with governance and management. So management is responsible for preparation and presentation of the financial statement, and those charged with governance oversee such financial reporting process. So see, in case of a small, let's say a proprietorship firm, so as such, there will be no demarcation between those charged with governance and management, right? But let's say in case of companies, there will be a demarcation. So management is responsible for preparation, presentation of the financial reporting. However, those charged with governance are overseeing such process. So those charged with governance may include audit committee, right? So let's say there is internal audit function. So those charged with governance and management has created this internal audit department by selecting or by hiring certain employees. Now let's say if management um, is responsible for just seeing as to who can constitute the internal audit function. So management is hiring its own persons in the internal audit function. Will they communicate any fraud that has been conducted by the management to those charged with governance? Answer is no. So that is why whether those charged with governance oversee, so they are responsible for overseeing, supervising the employment decisions relating to internal audit function. Example, remuneration policy. See, if the remuneration of the internal audit department is not appropriate, they may indulge into, wrong practices, because see, lack of motivation is there. They may, just collude with the management and they may do wrong activities. So whether those charged with governance, they oversee the employment decisions, right? Same with third point says whether there are constraints or restrictions by management those charged with governance. So that means in communicating internal audit finding to the external auditor. So let's say you are the auditor of ABC Limited. You see there is internal audit department, those charged with governance, management, everyone is working properly. Now there is a fraud, but those charged with governance and management has asked the internal audit department that you cannot communicate it with the external auditors. So influence is there, right? And the last point says whether the internal audit function is free of any conflicting responsibility. So I told you that if they have done any managerial and operational duties, and the same has to be reviewed by them only. So they will not say that we have done this mistake. So whether self-review threat should not be there in other terms, right? So this was with respect to what? Objectivity and evaluation. I hope it is clear. Now is competence and its evaluation. So what is meant by competence? So basically the attainment and maintenance of knowledge skills that will enable the internal audit department to perform the assigned task diligently and in accordance with the applicable professional standards. So whether they have that knowledge and skill that is required to act diligently. Diligently is with care, right? Applicable professional standards के साथ. So what you are going to consider, first of all, you'll see whether the internal audit department is adequately and appropriately resourced according to the size and nature of its operation. So let's say it is a very big company, Reliance, and the internal audit department consists of only two persons or one person. So is it commensurate or relative to the size of their organization? No. So auditor is going to consider that. Same way, whether there are established policies of hiring, training, assigning the internal auditors. So whether there are such policies or not, tabhi to competence level will be there. Technical training and proficiency in auditing, whether that has been given to the internal audit team, and whether they have the knowledge relating to entities financial reporting. So it may happen, see, it is not necessary that within that internal audit team there are all chartered accountants or there are all persons who have knowledge of financial reporting. So auditor is going to see as to whether the internal audit department or the internal audit function, they have an understanding of the knowledge relating to the entity's financial reporting and the applicable financial reporting framework. So auditor is going to consider that. So we have done objectivity and then we have done competence. Is it clear? Is it clear? And then see, this paragraph simply says that objectivity and competence will go hand in hand. Continuum, it means objectivity and competence may be reviewed as a continuum means in continuation, that is together. So you can, so if both the things are present, objectivity is there. So I'll write it again, just a minute. Just a minute. In continuation. So simultaneously, you need to consider objectivity as well as competence. So if both the things are there, objectivity is there, competence is there, then only external auditor is going to, use the work of the internal auditor. So if objectivity is there, but let's say competence is not there, or vice versa, competence is there, objectivity is not there, external auditor is not going to use that internal audit function, right? Clear? Then systematic and disciplined approach. So basically, see, there can be internal controls, there can be various internal audit activities, but unless and until they are in a systematic and disciplined manner. So how auditor is going to consider that? See whether everything is documented or not, whether there are quality control policies or procedures of the internal control department or not. See, this is going to affect as to whether the quality is maintained or not. And you all know the importance of documentation. We have seen it a number of times. Why to document, Hana? So whether there exist an documented internal control procedure or not, and whether that is adequate or not, whether that has been actually used or not, and whether the company is having appropriate quality control policies and procedures. So straightforward 3 or 4 mark question can come that you are conducting the audit of ABC Limited and internal audit function is there, and as an engagement partner you want to see whether the internal audit function is competent enough or not. So what factors you are going to consider? So these are the factors, that whether it is appropriately, adequately resourced as per the size and nature. So see, I've highlighted the keywords: policies for hiring, training, assigning the internal auditors, technical training, and so you may mark adequate also. Proficiency in auditing, knowledge relating to your entities reporting and applicable. So I will write it as applicable FRF, financial reporting framework. Is it clear? Is it clear? Quickly tell me. Now, if I ask you, what are the circumstances where the internal audit function cannot be used? So you will say, ma'am, where objectivity is not there, where competence is not there, or where discipline and systematic approach is not there. So just in the negative language, the next topic is mentioned. Quickly go through it. So circumstances when work of internal audit function cannot be used. So the external auditor shall not use the work of internal audit function if external auditor determines that the functions organization structure. Functions is what? Internal audit functions, organization functions and relevant policies and procedures do not adequately support the objectivity of internal auditors. The function lacks sufficient competence, or the function does not apply systematic and disciplined approach. Is it clear? Is it clear? Yes, Rakshit is saying, ma'am, can external auditor review or reperform the work done by internal audit department of entity, or he will just use that work done? See, ultimately, external auditor is responsible for his report, right? He will evaluate the work. If according to his professional judgment that work is appropriate, he may use that. So if he feels that he need to, just reperform that work. So let's say with respect to the any calculation, the auditor is relying on the work of the internal auditor. So he may on a sample basis just check, right? So it all depends upon auditor's professional judgment. Rakshit, is it clear? Yes, he can always review and reperform. See, nothing in the there is nothing in this essay which says that, and in fact, yes, just a minute. I'll just answer to this query of yours, Rakshit. See, it is mentioned here. Nothing in this essay. So we are on page number. So very good doubt, Rakshit, 4.35. So Rakshit's doubt is, can external auditor review or reperform the work done by external auditor, or he just have to use that work? See, this essay, say, why we are studying this essay, so as to avoid excessive or undue use by the auditor. If you remember, we have done this last line. This provides a framework for the external auditor's judgment regarding use of the work to prevent undue over use of the work of the internal audit function. And it says that nothing in this essay requires the external auditor to use the work of internal audit function to modify the nature, timing, or reduce the extent of audit procedure to be performed directly by the external auditor. It remains the decision of the external auditor in establishing the overall audit strategy. So it is not saying that the external auditor has to use. See, external auditor will evaluate. He will decide his nature, timing, extent accordingly, applying his professional judgment. But yes, why we are studying? So as to avoid any excessive use. कि इससे ज़्यादा नहीं. So for example, since it is mentioned in this essay that if objectivity is not there, if competence is not there, or if systematic approach is not there, do not use that work. Is it clear now, Rakshit? ठीक है? Now, when the auditor, external auditor, has to determine as to what is the nature and extent of work of internal audit function that can be used. So what is the nature? What is the extent, right? So auditor will first of all see, external auditor will first of all see. So let me just take you through my notes for this. So we have seen this, that if objectivity is not there, if competence is not there, or so if any of these things is not there, do not use the internal audit function, right? Now, see, when the auditor has to determine the nature and extent of work of the internal audit function that can be used, right? So external auditor has to consider the nature and scope of the work that has been performed by internal audit function or that is planned to be performed by internal audit function and its relevance. है ना? What is the nature? What is the scope of work that has been performed or that will be performed? And whether it is relevant or not. So certain examples are given in your module on page number 4.40, which says that, so basically these are the examples of the work of the internal audit function that can be used by the external auditor. So what are the areas where it can be used? So for example, testing the operating effectiveness of control. So if the external auditor has to test the operating effectiveness of control, if you remember, we check the operating effectiveness of control, right? So in that case, the external auditor may use the work of the internal audit function because they must have tested the operating effectiveness. It may the external auditor may use it. Now, what extent of the work, how much to rely, whether to recheck, all depends upon auditor's professional judgment. Is it clear? Then substantive procedures involving limited judgment. See, let's say any area is there whereby the accounting estimates are to be seen, whereby it is to be seen whether provision is to be created or it is to be shown as contingent liability. Or let's say where calculations of, let's say, provisions are to be made. So another, where uncertainty is involved, right? So where judgments are involved, their auditor, external auditor may use less or may not use the work of internal audit function. But where limited judgment, for example, let's say the internal control relating to sales, purchases, routine kind of transactions. So there the external auditor may use the work of the internal audit function. Then observations of inventory count. We all know that it is one of the internal control procedures, right? Then tracing transactions through information system relevant to financial reporting. So auditor may use the work of the internal audit function in that, and testing of compliance with regulatory requirements. So if any regulatory requirements are there, whether the same has been complied with or not. And let's say the internal audit department has made certain spreadsheets or has made certain reports with respect to such regulatory requirement compliance, then the auditor may use that. Is it clear? Is it clear? Now is just the opposite topic, that is where the external auditor should use less work of internal audit function and perform the function directly. So just the opposite. So the way we did this topic, that जहाँ objectivity नहीं है, competence नहीं है, systematic and disciplined approach नहीं है. Same way here it says, here it is where it can be used. So we said that nature and scope of work that has been performed or is to be performed is to be considered. And these are the examples where it can be used. Now are the examples where it cannot be used. So tell me, where will you not use or where will you use less of the work of internal audit function and try to perform more of the work directly? Quickly tell me. अभी तक जितना पढ़ा है ना उसी से try to give me one or two answers. Quickly send in your replies. Rakshit, Sejal, Sunil, Tanu, Rajita, Dharini, Rihanna. Quickly send in your replies. I really want to finish up with this essay today. I'm waiting for a reply, students. So see, where significant judgments are involved, तो वहां पर तो auditor is going to use he is going to work directly. ठीक है. Or when the judgment is involved relating to planning and performing the relevant audit procedure and evaluating the audit evidence obtained. So when the planning and performing of any relevant audit procedures is required and evaluating the audit evidence, तो evaluation में थोड़ी ना external auditor will ask the internal audit department, please do that for me, or whether you have done. External auditor is going to do his own evaluations, right? Where the assessed risk of material misstatement is high. Why? See, the risk of material misstatement is a function of inherent risk and control risk, and this control risk is related to internal control itself. So if the risk of material misstatement assessed is high, so wahan par to external auditor is obviously going to rely less on the internal control, where there is no objectivity or where the level of competence is low. Is it clear? Is it clear? See, what is your doubt? See, I'll just Sunil, just go through this point. I think after reading this point, your doubt with respect to objectivity will be clear. So we are on page number 4.40, paragraph number 2.9. So the circumstances in which the external auditor shall plan to use less of the work of internal audit function and perform more work directly. ठीक है? So it says that the external auditor shall make all significant judgments in the audit engagement to prevent undue use of work of the internal audit function and shall plan to use less work of the function and perform more work directly if the more judgment is involved in planning, performing relevant audit procedure and evaluating the audit evidence gathered. यहाँ पर more judgment is involved, what procedure to be performed, when to perform, evaluating. So वहाँ पर external auditor is going to perform that work on his own. Where the risk of material misstatement assessed as a assertion level is high, with specific consideration given to risk identified as significant. तो जहां पर भी auditor feels, for example, with respect to related party transaction, the assessed risk is high and this is one of the significant risk. So वहां पर auditor is going to work more directly. The less the internal audit function, status, organizational function, and relevant policies and procedure adequately support the objectivity of the internal auditors, or in other words, where the internal auditors are appearing to be less objective. So वहां पर तो you are not going to use that work, or if at all you are going to use, so you can say you are going to use less of the work and perform more of the work directly. The lower the level of competence of the internal audit function. So lower can be, see, when I say that you are going to use less, so it can be zero also, because this is one of the circumstances where you are not going to use the work. So I think Sunil, this is your doubt, है ना? So less means zero also, depending upon the situation. Is it clear? Is it clear? So students, the chat is enabled. You can send in your replies here also on Zoom. So Sunil is saying, yes, ma'am, it is clear. Okay. So I hope this is clear to you. Now see, when the auditor has to use the work of the internal audit function, right? So when you are going to use, so we are now discussing as to whether to use the internal audit function, the information, or direct assistance. So abhi I'm not talking about direct assistance. Okay? So I'm saying what? When the auditor is using the work of the internal audit function as the audit evidence. So in that case, the auditor is going to external auditor is going to discuss various things with the internal auditor. So what are those? If the external auditor plans to use the work of the internal audit function, the external auditor shall. So the external auditor is not using the internal auditors, but internal work of internal audit function work, right? So first of all, he'll discuss the planned use of its work for the purpose of coordinating the respective activities. See, if you are going to use, you are going to discuss now what is the planned usage, so as you are able to, coordinate the activities. Just a minute. Okay. Read the reports of internal audit function to obtain an understanding of the nature and extent of audit procedure it perform and the related findings. So peruse, read the reports of the internal audit function to see as to what procedures have been performed and what are the findings. And see who was that student, Rakshit. Now, with respect to your query, perform sufficient audit procedures on the body of the work of the internal audit function as a whole that external auditor plans to use to determine its adequacy for the purpose of the audit. So if you are going to use, you first of all, you are going to discuss so as to coordinate the respective activities. You'll read the reports to see to obtain an understanding of what audit procedures have been performed and the related findings, and if required, perform sufficient audit procedure on the body of the work of the internal audit function. Means maybe on some sample of whatever work has been done, a sample may be picked, right? So that the external auditor plans to use to determine the its adequacy for the purpose of the audit. Is it clear? Rakshit, is your doubt now? I think it is going to be more clear. Now, the next topic is what discussion and coordination. So in the first point, we were saying discuss so that you can coordinate. So what kind of discussion? What is the nature of the work to be performed? What is the timing of the work? What is the extent? So I always call it as nature, timing, extent, right? So separate points. Materiality for the financial statement as a whole, performance materiality. What are the methods of item selection and sample size? Hana, if they have done some work, on what basis sample was taken, right? Documentation of the work to be performed. So let's say the internal audit department is doing some work, right? And the external auditor has discussed with them, okay, you are doing this work for your purpose. I'll use it as an audit evidence also. Please maintain this documentation, right? Or what documentation of that work has been performed. Review and the reporting procedures. Simple. What and discussion and coordination, that we have just seen that what discussion and what coordinations will be required. So here, such coordination will be considered as effective when the discussions take place at appropriate intervals of time throughout the year. That discussion should be throughout the period. It should not happen that beginning of the audit mein ho gaya and end of the audit mein ho gaya. Throughout the period, there should be the discussion between the internal audit function and the external auditor at the appropriate intervals. Then this says that appropriate intervals per discussion hona chahiye. Second point says external auditor should communicate to internal auditor. Third point says internal auditor should communicate with external auditor. Now how? Let us see. The external auditor should inform the internal audit function of significant matters that may affect the function. So while conducting the audit, if external auditor becomes aware of anything that affects the internal audit function, the same should be communicated, and vice versa. That is, the external auditor is advised and has access to relevant reports of the internal audit function and is informed of any significant matter that come to the attention of the internal audit function when such matters may affect the work of the external auditor, so that external auditor is able to consider the implication of such matters for the audit engagement. So I'll do one thing. I'll not speed up. because the next two topics are important. So though I was trying to, just finish up with the excessive, but I'll repeat this topic again. This entire thing. Okay. So I'll repeat this: coordination and discussion. So we are saying there should be discussion and coordination of the external auditor with the internal audit function. So what discussion, what coordination should be there? There should be discussion with respect to the timing of the work that the external auditor is going to make use of the internal audit function, the nature of the work performed, the extent of the audit coverage, the materiality as well as performance materiality, right? Proposed methods of selection, item of selection and sample sizes. You all know that 100% checking is not possible. So with respect to financial statement, what all checking the internal audit function has done, what was the sample, how the sample was selected, right? Documentation of the work performed and review and reporting the procedures. Okay. Now, the next topic says that when will you consider such discussion and coordination to be effective, right? So it will be considered as effective when the discussions take place at appropriate intervals. So two keywords: appropriate intervals and throughout the period, right? And then I told you, second point says external auditor will tell internal auditor. Third point says auditor will tell external auditor. So second point says that external auditor informs internal audit function of significant matters that may affect the function. What are the significant matters that is going to affect the internal audit function if they have come across any such matter? The third point says the external auditor is advised of and has access to relevant reports of internal audit function. See, if internal audit team is saying we cannot give this report to you because management has asked us not to share any report. So is this coordination effective? No. And is informed of any significant matter that come to the attention of the function, internal audit function, when such matters affect the work of the external auditor, so that they can consider the impact of such matters for the audit engagement. So let's say there is, let's say, any of the litigation outcome that is going to come. So that is going to have an impact on the audit report, audit opinion of the external auditor, which management has not told the external auditors, but internal audit team is aware. So it should communicate it to the external auditor. Clear? Is it clear? Uh, Rajita, I am not able to understand your query. Please reframe it. Okay, are you finding it easy? So students, I'll do one thing, though I really wanted to complete this topic, but I'll just complete it in the next session because the two topics on page number 4.42 and 4.43 on with respect to SS 610, they are important. So let me just quickly take you through the module with respect to SS 610, and I'm telling you again and again a really very, very important essay, SS 610. Meanwhile, you can send in your queries. The Zoom chat is also enabled now. So see, we have understood as to the definition of the term internal audit function and the activities that it performs relating to governance, relating to risk management and internal control. Activities relating to internal control, we have seen evaluation of internal control, examination of financial operating information, review of operating activities, review of compliance with laws and regulations. And we saw that though the objectives may be different, but similar audit procedures will be performed. So the external auditor may make the use of this function in three circumstances. So first is what? To obtain information relevant to the external auditor's assessment of risk of material misstatement. Second is uh, after appropriate evaluation and unless it is prohibited by law or regulation, to use the work that has been performed by internal audit function in partial substitution for the audit evidence to be obtained directly by the external auditor. ठीक है, मतलब external auditor को काम तो करना ही है, but in partial substitution of the audit evidence. Then The external auditor may use internal auditors to perform audit procedures under the DSR, direction, supervision, review. I have led this topic with relating to direction, supervision, review, that is direct assistance, on page number 4.42, that I'll be covering up in the next session. Scope is whether to use the work of internal audit function or using internal auditors to provide direct assistance under the DSR. But nothing in this essay says that they have to reduce their nature, timing, extent of the audit procedures. Okay? Then, chalo. External auditors has the sole responsibility. Why we are studying SA 610? Because we want to, it provides a framework so that external auditor do not over or undue use make the undue usage of the internal audit function. Objectives are to determine whether the work can be used. If so, in which area, to what extent, and then if using the work of internal audit function, whether that work is adequate for that purpose. If using direct assistance, then to appropriately direct, supervise, and review. Evaluating me, we will see objectivity, competence, systematic, disciplined approach. So we have seen the various factors, and when these factors are not there, so these are the circumstances when the function cannot be used. So cannot be used, right? In determining the nature extent, the external auditor is going to consider the nature, scope of the work that has been performed or is planned to be performed, and whether it is adequate, relevant for the purpose of the audit. And there are certain examples. So again, you may get a 3 or 4 mark question that where it can be used by external auditor. So testing of operating effectiveness, substantive procedure involving limited judgment, and all these things. Where it can be used less, so where more significant judgments are there, right? Planning, performing, evaluating audit evidence, higher assessed risk of material misstatement, or where objectivity or competence is not there. And when using the work of internal audit function, discuss करना है, plan uses of work, coordinate करना है, read करना है reports, understand करना है audit procedures and the related findings, and perform the sufficient appropriate procedures with respect to that. Discussion, coordination of all these things, the timing, the nature, extent. So nature, timing, extent. ठीक है? Then your materiality, your proposed methods of selection of samples, documentation and review, and coordination is better when discussions appropriate interval per hai throughout the year hai, when external auditor informs and when the external auditor is informed. So I hope this is clear. So I have left this direct assistance wala, this topic on page number 4.42, and then topic on page number 4.43, and this. Okay? So before looking at your queries, I would like to tell you that in the next session, I'm not going to start with SF 530. SF 530 I'll take later on, but in the next session, I'll be starting with SF 501. That is given on page number. Just a minute. Be with me. Just give me 2 or 3 more minutes. So page number 4.68. So we'll try to cover 3 essays in the continuation. So please just go through these essays. Essay 501, essay 505. Okay? And one more essay. That is your essay 510. Okay? Just go through that. And for all those who say that ma'am understanding ho jata hai, but later on we are not fall short of words. So again, I like to repeat. Now this session is ending. Just take a break. After that, go through the module till page number 4.41. And in fact, today I started from page number 4.24. Right? So it is not that I'm asking you to read all 42 pages. It is better if you go through all the pages. But if you have already read the earlier session pages, go through today's session pages, and I'm sure your understanding is going to be more clear. And Sejal is saying, ma'am, this chapter is better than third. It is quite understandable. Sejal, this is because you have understood chapter number 3 also. Because the entire syllabus is in a sequence. You're going to understand the further chapters as and when the sessions will follow more clearly, because your understanding of the basics is done, right? So that's it from my side. Let me just have a look at your queries. So Rihanna, I'll try to, revise the entire chapter if time will permit. So like chapter number 4, I know it is a bit lengthy and an important chapter. So I'll definitely try that and I'll try that time will be there. So I'll revise this chapter. So any query, students, from your side with respect to today's session? So over to you, Ankita ma'am.
Thank you, Nancy ma'am. And students, for the next few lectures, the chat will only be enabled in the last 15 minutes of the session. For the rest of the session, chat will be disabled, but only for a few lectures. After few lectures, chat will be enabled throughout the session like it used to be. And before coming to next class, which is scheduled on Monday, do revise chapter number 4 covered till now. And one more information, Board of Studies is conducting Series 1 of Success at CA exams, which is scheduled tomorrow for Paper 5 Auditing and Ethics. Timings will be 2 p.m. onwards, so do join that, especially students appearing for May 25 attempt. Thank you all. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Ankita ma'am, for giving students all these details. So students, I hope you will definitely try to go through the module till where we have started. So thank you for your patient listening. Thank you for making this session interactive, and bye-bye. See you in the next session. Yes. Thank you.
Recording stopped.